Everyone knew something was wrong. No one stopped it. Adrian Jones, the boy who asked for help. This is not a story about a child no one saw. It is a story about a child who was known. Adrian Jones was 7 years old. He went to school. He spoke to adults. He asked for help. His words were recorded. Reports were filed. Decisions were made. What did not follow was protection. Adrian Jones was 7 years old. In 2015, he lived in Kansas, in the United States. He was a child of elementary school age, enrolled in school, listed in official records, present in daily routines that appeared ordinary from the outside. According to public records, Adrian lived with his mother and his stepfather. Other children were also in the home. On paper, it was a standard household, an address, a family unit, a child assigned to a local school district. Nothing about the structure itself immediately stood out as unusual. Adrian attended school regularly. He had a classroom, a desk, teachers who saw him during the week. His name appeared on attendance lists. He participated in school life in the ways expected of a child his age. He was visible within the system that tracks children during their school years. At school, Adrian was not isolated from adults. He interacted with teachers and staff. He was present in an environment designed to notice changes: attendance, behavior, physical condition. His existence was not hidden. He was known. Outside of school, Adrian's life was largely undocumented in detail. Like many children, most of his time was spent inside the home he returned to after classes ended. The routines of that home were not visible to the public. What happened there was largely inferred only through later records and reports. What is clear is that Adrian was not an anonymous child. He was registered, enrolled, and accounted for. He was part of systems meant to observe, report, and respond when something was wrong. His name appeared in files before his death. His presence was established long before the final outcome. At 7 years old, Adrian occupied the space between dependency and trust. He relied on adults for food, safety, and care. He relied on institutions, family, school, and social services to act when concerns arose. These were not abstract concepts in his life. They were the structures surrounding him every day. This chapter is not about what happened to Adrian. It is about who he was before the warnings, before the reports, before the investigations. He was a child who went to school, a child who lived at a known address, a child who was already visible to the systems meant to protect him. The first warnings did not appear at the end of Adrian Jones's life. They appeared early. Long before the final months, concerns about Adrian had already surfaced. These concerns did not come from a single source or a single moment. They emerged gradually through observation, repetition, and documentation. At school, changes were noticed. Adrian's physical condition raised questions. His appearance did not always align with what was expected for a child his age. School staff observed signs that suggested something was wrong. These observations were not isolated impressions. They were noted, discussed, and taken seriously enough to be reported. Educators are trained to recognize indicators of neglect and abuse. In Adrian's case, those indicators were present. What they saw prompted action. Concerns were passed along through the appropriate channels. Reports were made. These were not anonymous rumors. They were formal notifications. As a result, Adrian's home environment entered the awareness of child protective systems. His family became known to social services. Records were created. Files were opened. The system acknowledged that there was reason to look closer. This is where the timeline becomes important. The warnings did not arrive all at once. They came in stages. Each report added another layer of concern. Each contact suggested that the situation required attention. And each time, the system responded partially. Visits were conducted, conversations took place, assessments were made. The household was evaluated within the framework of existing child welfare standards. Based on those evaluations, decisions followed. Those decisions did not result in removal. Instead, Adrian remained in the same environment. The risk was assessed, but it was not deemed immediate enough to warrant separation. Files were adjusted. Monitoring continued intermittently. Life moved forward. At school, Adrian continued to appear. At home, conditions did not change. What matters in this chapter is not a single missed moment. It is the accumulation of moments. Each warning existed within a broader pattern. Each report suggested that intervention might be necessary, yet no decisive action occurred. The system did not ignore Adrian. It acknowledged him. But acknowledgement did not translate into protection. By the time later events unfolded, Adrian was already known. His name was already in records. The warnings had already been sounded. They simply did not stop what came next. Adrian Jones did not remain silent about what was happening to him. At school, he shared information about his life at home with adults whose role was to notice when something was wrong. What he described was not abstract or unclear. He spoke about hunger, about not having access to food, and about being confined inside the house. These were concrete statements that aligned with the physical condition teachers had already begun to observe. These disclosures did not happen in a single moment. Adrian spoke over time, in different instances, as concerns continued to surface. The information he shared remained consistent. Hunger, confinement, and fear were not isolated claims. They were repeated themes. Each time they were raised, they added weight to what had already been documented through observation. According to school reports, Adrian said that he was locked inside the home. This disclosure was not treated as a casual comment. Educators are required to document and report statements that suggest neglect or abuse. And in Adrian's case, his words were taken seriously enough to be recorded and passed along. His description of confinement added urgency to the concerns that had already been raised through earlier observations. Adrian also expressed fear. He told adults that he was afraid in his own home. When a child communicates fear alongside hunger and confinement, those statements are considered significant. In Adrian's situation, his words did not stand alone. They reinforced a pattern that was already forming through visible signs in previous reports. The information he shared was consistent, specific, and repeated. Once these statements were reported, responsibility moved beyond the classroom. School staff had completed their role by documenting and forwarding the concerns. From that point forward, Adrian's situation was no longer only a school matter. It entered the formal child welfare process, where decisions were made based on risk assessments, prior reports, and institutional thresholds. As a result, Adrian's statements entered official channels. They became part of reports reviewed by child welfare authorities. At that point, the system was no longer relying only on what adults thought they saw. It had direct disclosures from the child himself. These were not assumptions or interpretations. They were documented statements attributed to Adrian. Despite this, no immediate change followed. Adrian was not removed from the home. The disclosures did not lead to emergency intervention. The system acknowledged what he said, but the response remained procedural rather than protective. Assessments continued, files remained open or were adjusted, and Adrian continued to return to the same environment after school. This chapter is not about emotion or reaction, it is about record and response. Adrian told adults that he was hungry, that he was confined, and that he was afraid. Those statements were heard and documented. They moved through the system. They simply did not result in the protection he needed. What Adrian said was recorded. What followed was a process. By the time Adrian Jones's disclosures were documented, the situation had formally entered the child welfare system. Reports from the school were received, records were created, and responsibility shifted from individual adults to institutions tasked with assessing risk and determining intervention. From this point forward, decisions about Adrian's safety were no longer informal. They were procedural. Child welfare authorities initiated contact with the household. Visits were conducted. Information was gathered. The family was assessed according to established criteria used to evaluate neglect and abuse. These criteria relied on observable conditions, prior history, and determinations of immediate versus long-term risk. Within that framework, Adrian's case was reviewed. The system did not find itself unaware of Adrian. His name appeared in files. His situation was discussed. His disclosures were part of the record. The response, however, followed a measured pace. Interventions focused on monitoring rather than removal. The home was not immediately deemed unsafe enough to require separation. In child protection cases, thresholds matter. Decisions are often shaped by whether danger is classified as imminent. In Adrian's case, assessments concluded that while concerns existed, they did not meet the level that required emergency action. As a result, he remained in the home while oversight continued intermittently. This process repeated itself. Reports were acknowledged, evaluations were made. The system remained engaged, but its involvement did not escalate. Each step stayed within administrative boundaries. Adrian's living situation did not change. What followed was not a complete absence of response, but a limited one. The system functioned as designed, moving through checklists, standards, and protocols. It recognized risk without categorizing it as urgent. That distinction shaped every outcome that followed. During this period, Adrian continued to attend school and return home. The same environment that had generated concern remained intact. Monitoring replaced intervention. Time passed. This chapter is not about individual intent. It is about institutional process. The system responded to Adrian's case, but its response was defined by thresholds, assessments, and decisions that favored continuity over disruption. Protection was considered, but it was not enacted in a way that removed him from harm. By the time the system's involvement concluded, the underlying conditions had not changed. Adrian remained where he had been from the beginning. What followed was not a single decision, but a pattern. Adrian Jones's case moved through a cycle that repeated itself over time, producing the same outcome at each turn. Concerns were raised, reviewed, and documented. The system responded, but never in a way that altered Adrian's situation. Each report triggered a familiar sequence. Information was received, records were updated, contact was made, assessments were conducted. Based on those assessments, the risk was again categorized as insufficient for immediate removal. The file remained active or was adjusted, and Adrian stayed in the same home. This cycle did not happen once. It happened more than once. Each time, the conclusion was similar. There was acknowledgement of concern, but not escalation. Monitoring continued, but intervention stopped short of separation. The system remained present, yet distant. Time played a role in this process. Gaps formed between reports. Follow-ups were not constant. Periods of inactivity followed moments of attention. During those gaps, Adrian's circumstances did not improve. The environment that had prompted concern remained unchanged. From an institutional perspective, each step complied with procedure. From Adrian's perspective, nothing changed. He continued to return to the same house, to live under the same conditions, while files moved and decisions were made elsewhere. The cycle created a sense of resolution without resolution. Each assessment appeared to close a chapter, even though the underlying risk remained. By the time the next concern surfaced, the process began again, starting from a point that assumed stability rather than deterioration. This repetition matters. It shows that the failure was not the absence of warning, but the inability to break the sequence once warnings existed. The system did not overlook Adrian. It repeatedly reached him and repeatedly stopped short. As weeks turned into months, the cycle continued. Reports did not accumulate into action. Instead, they dissolved into routine. Adrian remained visible, yet unprotected. This chapter is not about what the system could have done differently. It is about what it did repeatedly. The cycle did not break, and as long as it continued, Adrian remained where he was. In the final months of Adrian Jones's life, visibility began to fade. The systems that had previously recorded his presence became quieter. Contacts were less frequent. Reports did not escalate. What had once been actively monitored shifted into absence. At school, Adrian's attendance and condition became more difficult to track consistently. The routines that had once placed him in front of teachers each day no longer provided the same continuity. As time passed, the signs that had prompted earlier concern were no longer met with the same level of response. Inside the home, Adrian's physical condition continued to deteriorate. Records later showed severe malnutrition and prolonged neglect. These conditions did not develop suddenly. They reflected an extended period during which basic care was not provided. There was no documented intervention during this time that altered his circumstances. Communication between agencies did not produce new action. The existing pattern held. Files remained, but movement stopped. The absence of urgent triggers meant that the situation remained classified within lower thresholds of response. As a result, Adrian remained in the same environment without interruption. During this period, Adrian became increasingly isolated. The structures that had once offered some degree of external contact, school, reporting, oversight, no longer functioned as protective barriers. What happened inside the home went unseen. Adrian's death occurred there. The medical findings later confirmed what the records had suggested over time: prolonged abuse and neglect. His body reflected months of deprivation. These findings aligned with the earlier warnings, disclosures, and concerns that had been documented before. This chapter is not about a final incident. It is about a prolonged absence of protection. By the time Adrian's condition reached a critical point, there was no active mechanism in place to intervene. The final months passed without interruption. No new removal, no escalation, no protection. After Adrian Jones's death, The focus shifted from child welfare assessments to criminal investigation. Law enforcement became involved, and the circumstances surrounding his condition were examined in detail. Medical findings confirmed that Adrian had died as a result of prolonged abuse and neglect. The evidence pointed inward toward the home where he had lived. Investigators reviewed the family environment, prior reports, and the timeline of Adrian's final months. Attention centered on the adults responsible for his care. The case moved quickly into the criminal justice system, where responsibility was no longer evaluated through risk thresholds, but through legal accountability. Adrian's mother, Heather Jones, was charged in connection with his death. The evidence presented reflected sustained neglect and abuse rather than a single incident. The court records documented the extent of Adrian's malnutrition and the conditions under which he had been kept. Heather Jones later entered a guilty plea. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adrian's stepfather, Michael Jones, was also charged. His case addressed his role in the abuse and neglect that occurred inside the home. He was convicted and received a lengthy prison sentence. Together, the verdicts established criminal responsibility for what had happened to Adrian. As the trial concluded, additional attention turned toward the systems that had been involved before Adrian's death. Media coverage and public discussion highlighted the prior warnings, the reports from school, and the involvement of child welfare agencies. Questions were raised about how a child known to the system could die without intervention. The legal process provided answers to some questions, but not all. Accountability was established within the courtroom, yet the broader failures remained unresolved. No criminal trial could address the decisions that allowed Adrian to remain in danger for so long. This chapter marks the end of the legal process, not the end of the story. The verdict closed the case in court, but it did not close the questions left behind. Adrian Jones's case did not end when the trial concluded. The legal process assigned responsibility and delivered sentences, but it did not erase what had come before. The records remained, the reports remained, the unanswered questions remained. This was not a case hidden in isolation. Adrian was known. He was enrolled in school. He was seen by adults outside his home. He spoke. His words were documented. Files were opened. Decisions were made. At every stage, the system was present. What did not happen is as important as what did. Intervention did not arrive in time. Removal did not occur. Protection remained procedural rather than physical. The structures designed to respond acknowledged risk, but did not disrupt it. The process moved forward, while Adrian remained where he was. After his death, reviews and discussions followed. Public attention turned to how many times concern had been raised and how many times it had failed to change the outcome. These discussions did not center on a lack of information, but on the limits of action. Adrian's story does not offer a single moment where everything went wrong. It shows something quieter, a series of decisions that individually did not trigger urgency. Together, they created absence. This is where the story ends, but not where its meaning does. Adrian was a child who asked for help. He did so within systems meant to listen. His voice was recorded. His situation was known. It still wasn't enough. Next on True Echoes, a new series begins. Missing persons who return home. Stories of children who were taken and returned. Next episode. 1. Stephen Stayner. The boy who escaped some children came back, but coming home was not the end. The truth coming soon on True Echoes. This case is not remembered because the signs were hidden. It is remembered because they were documented and still ignored. And that is why this story still echoes. What do you think failed first in this case? The system or the people within it? Share your thoughts in the comments. And step into the echoes of truth. To be continued.